northwest of Ireland. I hope you're all keeping very well. I'm not long back from the Mysterious Earth conference weekend and Atlantis film premiere in Preston, and it was, well, to say it was fantastic would be an understatement. Not only was the conference itself brilliant and went well, I met just so many beautiful people, and so much love and kindness was sent towards me. I was going around with a lump in my throat nearly all weekend, and some of the gifts, all the gifts you gave me, I was just like, I'm just so touched. It was just, I cannot believe that the tribe are so kind and loving and good natured and fun, and well, I can believe it, but it's when you get a validation of it, it's just so incredible, and to see them from all walks of life, all different kinds of people. It just makes me so proud, and I'm proud to be part of that world. That, like, whatever we are, wherever we've come from, it just feels so. And to hear people, so many people tell me, like, I helped them get through the last couple of years. Well, you really got yourself through the last couple of years. Give yourself credit for that. I was probably like maybe a drill sergeant or something, but ultimately it was you yourself. It was you alone who did that and walked that journey and on the path to your own hero's journey. So always remember that. Always give yourself credit. I was there, but I wasn't the reason why. You gorgeous bastards were the reason why. So I'm a little bit tired, but I'm feeling very creative and productive, and I heard some remarkable stories about people and what happened to them while they were in hospital that confirm my beliefs that this thing was some kind of spiritual alien invasion that probably every so often attacks the human race. It's now gone, but and harvested the energy it was got. But the next Vaughn will be about that. It'll be heavily coded, of course. But if you haven't seen the Atlantis film, it's Beyond Room 313 channel, and have a look at that and share it around. Especially, I want as many people as possible to see that. If you like it, don't thumb it up, but also give it a share. Share it on your social media forums, send it to your friends you think might like it, and so on. I'd really appreciate that. So would Neil. So, yes, so it was bizarre. I land in the UK, and the Queen dies, and I've got an alibi, by the way, and I unlike Randy Andy, I've got an alibi, but the day I was leaving, I was watching Prince Charles in Hillsborough, and be warned. Be warned. He is looking more and more like a King James type monarch that will have I'll talk about that in a second, but they went to Hillsborough in Northern Ireland, him and Carmilla, the most successful side chick in history. And imagine that, going from being a side chick to the Queen consort. Not bad. Respect, as Jacinta Ardern would say. And so many things that I live a kind of an isolated life in Ireland by choice. And so many things that I've assumed about the world were confirmed to me talking to people in Preston this weekend. Now, I made a video the other day, and I said that, she kept out of politics, except for the jab, okay, generally, but she generally kept out of politics. He is very much a constitutional monarch in terms of that he will constitutionally want to destroy the parliament. You're going to see with him. He is sausage fingers, is fingers and sausage fingers. He showed his true colors when there's that incident with the pen, and you could see him like he's losing his anger. He's not a real. They always act as fuddy-duddy nerds until they have the power, and then they show their real colors, and he'll be like King James, and absolutely. But instead of witches this time, it will be the whole Great Reset agenda. He will see carbon criminals around every corner, and it may not happen, but he will do everything in his powers to act as a kind to turn the status of the throne away from just being a figurehead with no power, which isn't entirely true, and turn it around into a kind of a satellite version of the House of Lords that won't vote on bills. He'll be actively pushing policy decisions that in times past would have led to a civil war. In fact, it did with Charles I, the English Civil War. And that's just, the irony was that Charles I was a pretty good guy as far as monarchs go. But so I posted something there yesterday. It was like Weekend at Lizzie's, and it was a piss take on the Weekend at Bernie's film poster with Harry and William holding up the dead Queen. It was very funny. And someone said, have some respect. No. I'll tell you why. And it's also, it's a mirror of the hypocrisy in the left as well, especially. First of all, there are photographs of her as a young girl giving Nazi salutes on photographs, okay? And the left, who are so quick to jump on word, the best fish, from those types, right? Who are so quick to show their hatred of working class people by jumping on a working class person who may have a photograph of them like that as growing up, or told on video telling an inappropriate joke by today's standards. They're the same ones who are so quick to jump on that are giving her a free pass on her and her siblings doing Nazi salutes. And you could say, well, if you're a decent person, and I would say it, not them types, but they would probably say to me, just because they're really hiding their hatred of the working class behind their so-called anti-fascism stuff, they would say, well, she was only a child, she didn't know any better, and it was an innocent childhood joke. But they wouldn't give that pass to a working class person. They absolutely wouldn't. Absolutely. But it's okay for them. And you could say, well, I would say, yeah, that's in a normal case, I would say that's true. But in this case, that Saxe-Gotha and Coburg household was loaded with Nazis. Prince Philip attended an SS funeral in full SS regalia on display. Her uncle, Prince Edward, and Mrs. Simpson, the so-called commoner, were unashamedly Third Reich National Socialist lovers, infatuated with Hitler and the Third Reich. And so that whole household was completely saturated. The most Nazi household in 1930s Britain wasn't Oswald Mosley's household. It was whose household? The Windsors, as they were calling them by that, and after they chopped their name from Saxe-Gotha and Coburg. The Windsors, okay? That was a household saturated in National Socialism. But do the left bring that up? Oh, no, of course not, because they only go after the working class. We all know that. Best fash is another way of saying it. Get the commoners, same way. And on top of that, and I wouldn't be obsessed with that because I'm not the type because I'm not Abrahamic in nature, like these wokey types are. I don't blame the sins of the father, and I don't say they are visited upon the son. I'm not one of those types who say, oh, look what his grandfather was like. I'm not like that. I treat everyone as an individual. And then you say to me, why don't you treat her like that now that she's grown up and the Nazis are defeated? One simple reason: there's a constitutional clause in the monarchy which says Catholics are forbidden from marrying into royalty. And it's quite clear Catholics are forbidden from marrying into. Now, they can marry into royalty, but they can't have the rights of succession. So they can never sit on the throne and they can never be a consort to a monarch. So, for ostensibly, Catholics are banned from the British royal family to this day. So when Prince Charles was on in Hillsborough Castle yesterday, in Belfast, talking about diversity and inclusion, he is a sectarian, bigoted monarch. Of course, he may want to change that, and then I'd say, well, fair fucks to you. Will he do it? Not him. God, no. Okay, he's like as conservative as they get. The Queen Elizabeth would practically be a hippie next to him, in terms of him. Now, he is just exercising the current globalization that his great uncle Prince Edward was exercising when he was obsessed with the Third Reich National Socialists. Ironically, his father figure was Hitler, a German. Ironically, Klaus Schwab is the father figure of Prince Charles. History just repeats itself, and nobody says nothing. Okay, so the Great Reset is the same thing as the National Socialism. It involved many of the same things, like the national, breeding programs. That's what this reduction in population is. That's all that is. Changing people with chemicals. These were all central to National Socialism. And there's nothing but Mengeles out there in the Great Reset and the WEF. Nothing but Mengeles. And they all get away with it. They all get away because nobody learns from history. Nobody learns. And everybody still believes the media. And they can't think for themselves. Well, except people like us, we can. And we're growing in numbers massively. And so in her lifetime, if she had abolished the ban on Catholics marrying, sitting on the throne or being consorts, and there are other things that Catholics are banned from, I would have said, she was all right in the end. She didn't do it, and he definitely won't do it. So that's how inclusive these people are. Now, you have to remember where, and I compared him to King James earlier on. Now, King James in the early 1600s was a fanatical anti-Catholic who was terrified of witches. And it may have been a neuroses rooted in Elizabeth I. And the kind of people they didn't call it a fairy queen for nothing, as Alan Moore says. And he wrote the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of the Witches, a book on how to identify witches and what to do with them. He was the one who invented the term, "Thou shalt not suffer one to be a witch." He also had the law circumvented. This is how dangerous these fuckers are when they start messing with the law. Under English civil law at that time, children's testimonies were not applicable in court, except for two things. They could testify if the accused was a Catholic or a witch. They could so an 8 or 9-year-old could stand in a dock and go, "He's a witch, she's a witch," based on that, just based on that, not being and tell the most bizarre stories. And during this period, there was such a vicious anti-Catholic hatred that there was no difference between being a devil worshipper and being a papist. The Christian Puritans, which began with James when he wrote his King James Bible, identified things like the transubstantiation and the Stations of the Cross with with witches' Sabbaths and black magic. And that's where that all came from. I know it began with Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, but the actual institutionalization of the anti-Catholic hatred within the monarchy began with King James. And there was many people who were put to the stake were killed because they were Catholics, and they would drum up the witchcraft things just to do it. In fact, it was so bad that there were people who were arrested for anti-Catholic crimes who would say for being Catholics, sorry, and doing things like having the Catholic Mass, who would actually say, no, I was a witch, and I was a witch, I did witchcraft. And the reason for that was a witch was generally hanged by the neck. A Catholic was burned alive. So the Catholics would actually say, no, I'm a witch, in order to escape being burned alive on the pyre. It would be quicker and easier to die by being hanged. And that's amazing when you think about it. And that's the ethos behind Prince Charles and these people today. Now, King Charles the Third, as we now know him, he is the same kind of monarchist as King James. He is a active, hands-on, I'm going to run the country and subvert the laws. So don't be surprised if bills go through Parliament that he is somehow directly pushing on things such as climate change, carbon reduction, the works, right? All that's woke WEF stuff, okay? All you will own you will own nothing and be happy, but he'll own everything and be very happy. And that's what that's all about. And we have to make do less stuff, you know. And meanwhile, when he lives in spectacular luxury. And this is what he'll be like. This is what he will be like. He will be talking about austerity while he has £150 million hat on his head. You know that, and he owns all of Cornwall and a huge chunk of Scotland, and lots of other things. His actual accumulated wealth now is something like £53 billion. That's about $60 billion. Billion. So he's up there in the Davos Club by means of just being born at the right place at the right time. Now, someone said something about the royals, their birth and death dates are not true. That's correct. They're still afraid of witches to this day. And they don't, when all these monarchs are born, they were usually born a couple of days before or a couple of days after. And it's also when they died. And they leak out incorrect dates because witches might use astrology to get them, to damage them. So they're still very much neurotic about all that stuff. Now, the King James thing, the neuroses against Catholics and witches, you know, that will now be transformed to war. He will expect Prince Charles to produce his new Malleus Maleficarum, the hammer of the carbonites, and he will produce some document that will have crushing penalties and to penalize. You know, you'll have a carbon penal laws against anyone who doesn't do the WEF agenda. And it will actually be produced in court to not only fine people for carbon crimes, but to actually imprison them. And you remember what I was saying about that the testimony of little children was made applicable in court? It wasn't until Charles II, a monarch I quite like, Charles II undid all that madness, that anti-Catholic sectarianism. He wanted to have normal relationships with Ireland. In fact, that was what really sentenced him to death. Cromwell accused him of being like the Catholic king, the secret Catholic king of the Irish. He was he was the one that stopped all the witch burnings in England and Scotland, and in England, because he had read a case about some people who were completely innocent, who had been accused of witchcraft, and they were hanged, and it was done on the testimony of a 10-year-old boy, and then the 10-year-old boy said later he was lying. Okay, so King Charles I, to his credit, said that no more witch trials in this country must be conducted without me and my personal magistrates and legal professions examining the case. And literally overnight, by doing good police work, as it was called back, forensic investigation before forensics, and having top quality lawyers rather than civil servants and bureaucrats deciding that a 9-year-old was more intelligent, was more trustworthy than a 20 than a 40-year-old, that it all overnight it all stopped. Well, where are we today? We have been told that little kids have the right to change their gender without their parents' permission. We have Greta Thunberg pretending to be a 9-year-old going, "How dare you?" Like there was no difference between Greta Thunberg. In the time of the witch burnings, these little boys and girls who used to go around fingering innocent people as, "He's a witch! He's a witch!" They used to become superstars, and they used to be taken on tour around England and Germany and other countries, in Sweden, where they existed, and were fawned over by the establishment. What the hell was Greta Thunberg? How dare you? Right? Am I right? Am I fucking right? And they've now reduced children to having the status of adults in terms of making, well, social and cultural decisions. So a 9-year-old, it's like Desmond is amazing, has more political pull these days under Biden's government than someone who is, say, someone who's a philosopher, who's well read, who has a great understanding of life. He wouldn't. Clarence Thomas. There you go. Clarence Thomas, a black man, who worked his way up into the Supreme Court while being assassinated along the way by the likes of Joe Biden, attempted, and a can of Coke with the pubic hairs on it, which I still find funny. But still, attacked him along the way, became Supreme Court Justice, and he was instrumental in the Roe v. Wade overturn. And the same people who call themselves, anti-racism, were calling him the N-word. George Takei called him a blackface on camera. The same people who spend their lives building an image of themselves on political correctness and wokeness were the biggest racists of all when Clarence Thomas came along. So we have a situation where the United States of America, perhaps the greatest democracy ever created, the country that, on the whole, despite the animals inside certain aspects of it, has generally been a nation that stood for good in the world, that put a man on the fucking moon, And we now have a situation where Desmond is amazing would have more political influence than Clarence Thomas. He's a witch! He's a transphobic witch! Am I right? Am I fucking right? Are we not back to those days again? But instead of it being, witches, it's carbon criminals. Instead of being Catholics, it's papists, I should say. It's transphobes. Instead of being witches, it's homophobes. Instead of being witches, it's racists. Instead of being witches, it's someone who didn't call someone by the correct pronoun. He's a witch! He didn't call me by my correct pronoun! He's a witch! Am I right? That's where we are. And we are entering a dangerous phase. For the normies, we're all right, because we know all about all this stuff. But if Prince Charles gets the power that he thinks this has been given by God, because remember, the English monarchs are the God's representative on earth as far as the Church of England is concerned, and all the Anglican churches, and the Church of Ireland, and the Church of Scotland. He is going to exercise his status as God's representative on earth by creating the hammer of the hammer of the carbon users. He is an extremely dangerous motherfucker. He is very, very dangerous. And you expect the media to fawn over him like he is God himself. He will be everything the mainstream media are told to love. And the masses, of course. I mean, like, I'm looking at in Ireland right now, the Irish media is fawning over the Queen and him. You wouldn't even know we were a republic. And many of the Irish population doing the same. But hey, that's what we've always been like here. You know, it's like those stupid. Like, I've no like these things. Like, you're supposed to respect the Irish who died in World War One. I can respect the ones who maybe had no choice and they had it done. And I can't even respect them ones. The ones that did it for a job. I can't even respect them ones. It was clear by 1915 that the British Army had been annihilated by the Germans. There was none left. And they had to keep feeding in new, fresh recruits to be destroyed on the Western Front. It was an illusion not one inch of German territory had fallen, not even a centimeter, a millimeter, and there was just everyone they knew was being killed. And then the Irish going, so we got to fight for little Catholic Belgium. We got to fight for little Catholic Belgium. So we do. Because Ireland is little Catholic Ireland. So if we do what John Redmond says, and we put on our uniform and become the Irish Volunteers, and we're torn to bits by a German shell or machine gun on the Western Front, we're doing it to free Ireland and to free little Catholic Belgium. Now, how the fuck do you free Ireland by having your guts hanging out of you on the Western Front after, a German attack on your trench? How does that free Ireland? They might like us. Why do you want them to like you? Because we haven't. Oh, no, everyone's loved the Irish. You know, that kind of thing. And little Catholic Belgium. It would have took them 5 minutes to check on that and find that Belgium at that time was a brutal imperial power with a royal family that was the same royal family as the British. In fact, Belgium was a bigger empire than Germany. Germany had a few pieces of land in Africa. Belgium had vast territories in Africa, the entire Congo. And they exercised horrific human rights. Even back then it was well known about. It would have took them 5 seconds to check that. Just like today, it would take them 5 seconds to find out that Zelensky and his Azov thugs were murdering ethnic Russians in the eastern Ukraine. And that's why Putin invaded. And it is not, and they're not marching towards Kiev and being held back. They captured the territories where they could protect ethnic Russians. The war was over in a couple of hours. It would take them a few seconds to check that. But no, they drive trucks into the Russian embassy in Dublin, and they couldn't even find Ukraine on a map because they're all fired up. I'm fighting for the Ukrainians, I am. Putin is the reason. Putin is the reason my kids can't afford a home. Putin is the reason why the lights were off in winter. Putin is the reason why all of my relatives got the jab and they're dead. Putin is the reason why me food bills are so high. That's what you're up against. Poussez la chance, poussez la menches. The more things change, the more they stay the same. But this time, we have a tribe. Sanguine Gnosis, love you so.